I'd had my eye on this series for a while before its second entry, Ori and the Will of the Wisps, came out earlier this year. I knew it had an absolutely gorgeous art style and an equally gorgeous soundtrack, and I knew that tons of people had gotten really emotionally attached to this little game. But to be honest, the fact it's a Metroidvania really intimidated me, so I put it off for a while. I'm absolutely awful at precision platforming, and even worse with directions and getting lost. But I always had that intrigue. And so when Will of the Wisp was announced, I thought to myself, fuck it, this is the perfect time. So over lockdown, I played both the original game and the sequel, and well, holy crap, my mind was freaking blown, and I had to get my thoughts and feelings out somehow. So let's discuss the two love children of Moon Studios. I mean, even the title screen is gorgeous. Ori and the Blind Forest is incredibly immersive and just downright beautiful from the second you start it up. The story obviously isn't going to work if we don't connect with the characters, but the opening cutscenes make damn sure we do, with some of the most vivid and expressive animation I've ever seen. How Ori is curled in a little ball when she sleeps, slowly opens her eyes and raises her ears on waking, stretches, cows in fear as she walks and strains to pull herself over a log. So much emotion and personality is conveyed without a single word of dialogue. And this goes for Naru too. You can feel the passion in this hug and the joy in this throw, and our attachment to them and their relationship builds in no time at all. They just feel so real and present. And when this is combined with the incredible score from Gareth Coker, well, you get one hell of an intro. This straight up feels like a Disney movie. And as expressive and adorable as all the little characters are, it's definitely not at the expense of the environments. All the backgrounds are incredibly detailed and layered. There's tons of really nice lighting effects, like these little sun rays peeking through the trees, and this little rainbow in the waterfall. And in general, just the use of lighting, color, and settings used impeccably to set the mood of every area. The colourful, hand-painted looking art style is unique and it fits the tone fantastically. It's just a visual gem. But okay, let me quit my mindless gushing. We all know the game looks freaking incredible. That much is obvious from, well, just looking at it. But how are the controls? How's the level design? Even the most gorgeous aesthetic in the world wouldn't be able to save a game if it controlled like shit after all. Well, I'm happy to say that for the most part, the game plays pretty freaking amazingly. In terms of movement, Ori's a light, swift little thing. She's got flexible and responsive movement options and very intuitive physics to boot. Mobility and moving around the world feels great. Combat is really lacking though. Killing enemies is literally just mashing, and it's every bit as involved as it looks. And the majority of the level design is stellar. There's lots of branching paths and these little nooks with collectibles hiding in them, plus a healthy dose of places you can only access by returning with later abilities in true Metroidvania fashion. These elements of the level design do a great job incentivizing exploration and piquing interest, and it helps that the collectibles are genuinely valuable. Life and energy are precious and finite resources, so being able to store more of them is a huge reason to try and track cells down. And whilst you can technically get the equivalent of experience points, that being Spirit Light, from enemies, the containers have so much more, and the amount of experience needed for new abilities gets so big by the end that they're still really desirable. With such a huge, sprawling world map, you might think it could sometimes be frustrating and annoying to get where you want to go, but thankfully the world has spirit wells everywhere which act as fast travel points. As long as you can get to a spirit well, and they're never that far away, you can always warp to any other, which pretty much alleviates this potential issue. As well as this, Ori has the ability to make a special fire called a soul link at any point on the map, which basically acts as a checkpoint. It can't be warped to like wells can, and you can only have one at a time, but my god is this system needed. The game gets really freaking hard at points, and if you had to go back to the nearest well every time you died, you'd spend most of your time just redoing platform challenges, which would get super tedious. Soul Links make being able to retry sections after dying painless, whilst also not being broken. They require energy to make, so you can't just mindlessly spam them. You could say that dying isn't even a punishment now, but I don't really see a negative here. If you picked up collectibles since your last Soul Link, you'll lose them, which can be incentive enough, but since you're required to do the platforming challenges to progress, it's hardly like there's no reason for the player to try their best to stay alive, even if dying has an extremely tiny penalty. It just shaves off the tedium of having to do stuff over and over and over again, which I've always felt is an outdated system anyway. Like, yeah, old games couldn't fit much on the cartridge, so it was needed to not finish a 60 quid purchase within a couple of hours, but that's not a thing now. So I really appreciate the elegance and flexibility of Soul Links. But anyway, back to the level design. The best location in the entire game might just be the Ginso tree. There's lots of neat little puzzles involving redirecting projectiles through portals and such, but perhaps most importantly is how it utilizes one of Ori's best abilities, Bash. Bash is a move that has Ori latch onto an enemy, projectile, or lantern, and use it to launch herself in any direction. It's a very versatile and satisfying movement option with the whole charge and release, plus it has the added benefit of turning enemies from just a nuisance to a central platforming tool. And in addition to this, the projectile or enemy will be launched in the opposite direction to Ori whenever she bashes off it. This is the basis for a lot of the later puzzles in the Ginso tree, which are really creative, and it even changes combat. If an enemy is shooting projectiles, you can either be safe and slow with the standard attack, or you can go in and use Bash to give them a taste of their own medicine. This aspect of Bash is even used to unlock otherwise blocked collectibles, so it's an amazingly simple and easy to understand yet really flexible tool. But the best part of the Ginso tree comes at the very end. As soon as you've cleared it of infection, boom. There's a sudden and exhilarating escape sequence, gorgeous music swelling like crazy as you just soar up as it bashes and jumps and it's just so good. And then at the end of it all, you burst out the top of the tree, and there's just this sudden calm music as you gasp in relief and watching oars of water gushes everywhere. It's the perfect marriage of music and aesthetic to gameplay, and it has such an emotional resonance. Also, speaking of water, can we just acknowledge this real quick? If you don't just want to squeeze that little thing right now, I do not understand you. That's fucking precious. So that's one of the best locations in the entire game, but do they all live up to that standard? Unfortunately, nah. The Ginso tree is one of 3 dungeons, if you will, and the other 2 have puzzles and escape sequences just like it does. The Full-On Ruins has a pretty creative but frustrating gravity thing going on. You have to carry this ball to even use the gravity mechanic, and it severely limits your movement options, which isn't too fun. And the escape sequence is just kind of miserable. Like, rather than shooting up with bashes and leaps and springs, you have to just slowly glide on this wind current, which kind of ruins the sense of, like, panic and exhilaration. And there's a couple of really annoying design choices too that just went in the Ginso tree. There's these icicles that spawn with RNG, these insta-kill falling rocks, poorly communicated direction of where to go at times. It kind of just forces trial and error, which is never a fun gameplay loop. And the escape from Mount Horror has similar issues too. Now these sequences only last about a minute per each clean run, if that, so it doesn't really put too much of a blight on the entire game. But it's still just frustrating, like, how are these very clear design issues still in the final release? Like, did they not find it unfun when they were playtesting it? I was also kind of frustrated by a few later game areas, like some of the puzzles in Misty Woods and having to thread these needles in Sorrow Pass, but that's more on my own skill level than anything. There's no blatantly bad game design here like there is in the escape sequences. They're just kind of difficult, and I'm not good at platformers, so that's all it really is. And that's pretty much about what I have to say on the original game. So, as a TLDR, or I guess TLDW? TLDW? I loved Ori and the Blind Forest. Like, really loved it. The world of Nibel is so gorgeous and sucks you in immediately, and the soundtrack is absolutely stunning. Suspense, sadness, raw joy, it's all captured in these gorgeous notes in an incredibly distinctive style. The tracks with the little vocalizations are especially beautiful, and so much of the soundtrack is in a playlist I have to go to sleep to. Tons of the tracks are just so warm and comforting. The level design is really difficult and sometimes frustrating, sure, but it's almost always creative and fair, really only with a few exceptions. I left the game just thinking to myself, wow. Like, wow, that was fucking incredible. And I could not freaking wait to get into Will of the Wisps. The thing was, the bar for quality was set so high. It's really easy for a game with incredibly lofty expectations to not be received well, especially when people have a big emotional connection. And oftentimes, these sequels will either be extremely divisive or just plain disappointing. But you know what? I had faith in Moon Studios, and I was really eager to jump back into this beautiful world of Ori. So I booted up the game, almost literally shaking with excitement. No word of a lie, I sat here on this title screen for about 3 minutes straight. It's just as pretty as the first one, if not prettier. Look at that freaking sun. But there's somehow a slight darkness to it all. Maybe it's the slightly melancholy of music, I don't know, but it's an amazing way to give you chills and clearly hint at the tonal shift going forward. Going into the actual game, wow. The opening sequence is similar conceptually to Blind Forest. It portrays an adorable and loving little family and really makes you care for them. Except this time, the family has a new member, the adorable baby owl, Ku. And somehow they made the animation even more expressive and improved the soundtrack? No, seriously. The land of Nywen is also somehow even prettier and more immersive than Nibel was. It easily has the nicest looking areas in both these games, including the stunningly peaceful Luma pools and the entrance to Bow's Reach. But by far the thing that helps this game's tone and atmosphere the most is the addition of NPCs. Nywen is populated by tons of them. There's an adorable race of cat-like creatures named the Moki, powerful yet kind figures like Kulok and Bauer, and, most importantly, the little community centered around Wellspring Glades, which, by the way, is easily my favorite area in these two games. Maybe in any game ever. Compared to the hazardous world around it, the gameplay here is so calm and tranquil. Watching the wind gently blow as the incredible peaceful music plays is just indescribably relaxing. It's a place of respite and safety. And this emotion is perfectly enhanced by the community of creatures that live there. Throughout the game, you can find a new collectible called Gorlicore, which can be given to a character here named Grom. He'll use it to develop the glades, building the Moki tree houses, giving them roofs, and ultimately providing the feeling that you're helping out and changing the lives of these friendly occupants. There's also mysterious seeds you can find throughout Nywen to give to the gardener Tully, who will then use them to grow stuff that not only beautifies the area, but makes it easier to get around. The sticky blue moss, the tree in the middle of the glade that grants you an ability, these hanging vines. You ultimately feel like you're developing a relationship, building and caring for this community of adorable creatures. I don't want to overstate it, but I find this place so therapeutic for this reason. Especially over lockdown, I found this sense of connection and safety really helpful and calming. And going back to Blind Forest after I beat Will of the Wisps to 100% it was weird. Compared to Niwen, Nibel feels so isolated and lonely and kind of scary in a way that I don't think it was necessarily intended to. But yeah, Wellspring Glades, man. Like, on so many occasions when I've just been like sad or anxious, I'll sometimes just literally just go here and soak in the atmosphere and hang out with the community. Like, I know it's fake, obviously, but my god, if it doesn't provide a very real sense of escapism and just connection, it's so nice. Kinda related to this point is the change that they made to how Spirit Light works. Fundamentally, it's the same basic premise. You kill an enemy, the enemy drops yellow orbs, you use their yellow orbs to get Swole. However, in Will of the Wisps, Spirit Light isn't experience, it's currency. Instead of having an ability tree you could open at any time, you speak to the salespeople in the Wellspring Glades to buy or upgrade equipable abilities in the form of shards. Admittedly, this is less convenient. It was nice to just be able to pop up Soul Link and have everything there, to be honest, but warping to the Glades really doesn't take long, and it does wonders for the immersion and connected feel. It's a subjective thing whether this is better or not, but personally I definitely enjoyed this more. It's a small dent of convenience for a big jump in immersion, which is a trade-off I'm fine with in this case. And speaking of warping, the worlds work in a more convenient way now. Rather than only being able to warp between them as was the case before, you can now warp to them from any point on the map. This streamlines travel even further, and is an incredibly nice ability in the post-game especially. Even Ori's movement has been improved. Her agility and key abilities like Bash are all still here, so the excellent core from Blind Forest is retained. But she's gained quite a few new ones to fit in seamlessly, such as a grapple, a burrow, and a water dash. There are tons of passive and active abilities now. Shards are the passive ones, but you can also switch between active abilities completely on the fly, assigning different attacks or healing abilities to the face buttons however you see fit. This menu is always available at the press of a button, so you can adapt your strategies really quickly and flexibly to tackle immediate and specific threats. It's really nice. Speaking of attacks, the lackluster combat in the original game has been hugely improved. Rather than literally just having your light companion Sign do all the work for you, Ori now wields a Bleed of Light for her standard attack in this game. Being a melee weapon, it feels so much more visceral and requires way more precision, but it still has more than enough range to be practical and not frustrating. And now Ori has way more options than her standard attack too, like a much stronger yet slower club, a bow and arrow, insanely powerful projectiles that consume energy. You really can deal with enemies however you want to now, which is a huge and very welcome upgrade to the gameplay. So, with all this gushing, Will of the Wisps is a perfect game, right? No. It's absolutely my game of the year, maybe my personal favorite ever, but oh my god, it definitely has its fair share of problems. Whilst it has my absolute favorite areas in the series, it also has by far my least favorite too. Moldwood Depths. Your visibility is severely limited, meaning you have to just sit and wait around a lot for these stupid fireflies to move and reveal your path so you can see where you're going. As if that weren't bad enough, the darkness doesn't just obscure your vision, it also insta-kills you. Fun! Granted, the atmosphere down here is really cool and creepy, and the darkness is a big part of that, but for me, this is an example of the dedication to Root going too far, because it straight up ruined the gameplay for me. I can't wait to get out of this stupid place. Also, like, the game is weirdly buggy. I personally played on Switch, which seems fairly stable compared to the PC version. I mostly just got random weird bugs that didn't break the game, but they did break my immersion at times and made it seem somewhat unpolished. The main bugs I experienced when playing is this weird lag sometimes when I go into an area that for some reason hasn't rendered and has to catch up. Some minor and very rare, yet very present stutters, and even a weird bug when I tried to bash off this enemy and somehow clipped into a rock. I've never had a full game crash or anything really worse than this, so it's not ruinous by any means, but it's there, and it really kinda shouldn't be. Moon might be an indie studio, but they're way bigger after the success of Blind Forest, and this game had a lot of time in the oven. So this really does seem weird, especially since I'm recording this in November and it came out in March. How hasn't this been patched yet? With all this being said though, I absolutely adored Will of the Wisps. I was genuinely sad to finish it, and I do kind of want to replay it, but the thought of having to go through the depths again is enough to put me off, at least for now. But my god, the atmosphere, the artistry, Ori's movement, and the consistently creative level design. Will of the Wisps takes what worked so well about Blind Forest and upgrades and improves it tenfold, whilst also never being so innovative as to lose the core of what made the original so treasured. It almost integrated its own predecessor only 5 years later, and that's insane. I have no idea what the future of the series is. I would definitely love more games in the universe, but Will of the Wisps kind of felt like a satisfying conclusion, even if it's open-ended. And it's definitely better to leave it here than to maybe go the Game of Thrones route. Expectations for the sequel would just be so freaking high. I don't really know how I feel about the idea. On one hand, I have tons of faith in being serious, but on the other, they aren't wizards, and maintaining such a high standard of quality over such a long time would be a highly daunting prospect for anyone making anything. But regardless of what happens, I can easily say that I went from having never played these games to them being some of my favorite, if not my absolute favorite games of all time. They're most definitely not perfect, but they're little artistic gems. They're gorgeous and emotional with incredibly fun and engaging gameplay. And they're definitely an experience I'm going to hold on to and treasure for a really long time. Moon Studios created one of the most beautiful and immersive universes I've ever seen in any piece of media, and yet still somehow managed to one-up themselves. And that is a massive, massive feat.